I want to begin today with a warning. Our communities are under threat from roving mobs of con artists, pushing their wares on the gullible, the desperate, and the impulsive. And I know a few that are safe from their ploy. And there's a couple of deviants that are particularly concerning to me. My daughters. You see, they are members of a cabal that permeates the fabric of America, Girl Scouts USA. Every January, they comb the neighborhood and stake out the department stores, pushing a product that, while delicious, is devoid of any nutritional value. And when I was a single man, I used to buy 1 or 2 boxes. And then I had 2 Girl Scouts of my own and a network of friends' daughters pushing cookies like a street corner drug dealer. And I found that number increased exponentially. You see, Girl Scouts USA has developed cookie sales as a fundraiser, but also as an opportunity to develop leadership skills and to learn about economics. And there's some lessons about economics that we can learn from them. You see, sociologists would describe this ability of Girl Scouts to sell cookies to their network as social capital. And just like other forms of capital, such as physical capital used in production, or financial capital used to buy supplies, social capital has an advantage, an economic advantage for those that hold it. Now, the conventional wisdom is that the secret to economic success is rooted in who you know. And history is filled with examples where this is true. You might think about Harry Truman getting elected because of Tom Pendergrass and the Kansas City Democratic machine. Or Henry Luce, the founder of Time magazine, whose wealth came at the hands of Nettie McCormick, a member of the Chicago social elite. But there is increasing evidence that it's not who you know that matters. It's how many people you know. In other words, economic success comes not from knowing one person really well, but from having a large and diverse social network. So you might think about the Girl Scouts. If a Girl Scout knows one person, she sells a couple of boxes of cookies. If a Girl Scout knows dozens of people, the number of cookies that she can sell increases dramatically. Now, this is not a radically new idea. We have known for a long time that there is a connection between relationships and economic outcomes. But what I want to argue for you today is that the economic advantage of relationships isn't only for individuals, but that there is an economic advantage of relationship for communities. A group of scholars, including myself and Craig Abushan and Barry Rubin at Indiana University, looked at job creation and per capita income in the largest 50 metropolitan communities in the United States. And what we found was that those communities that were most socially integrated, in other words, those communities where individuals were connected to each other in frequent and diverse ways, produced jobs at a much greater rate than those communities where people were less socially integrated. And not only that, but of the 24 common predictors of economic growth that we considered, social capital was the second biggest predictor. Now don't get me wrong, education matters. Education matters more than anything. But social capital predicted job creation more than every other indicator, including the level of manufacturing in the community and the number of professionals in the community. So you might think about it this way. If I live in a community and everybody that I know works at the same bank, there is very little economic benefit for the community. Sure, the bank is unlikely to lose my business, but I offer very little to them in terms of meaningful referrals. By contrast, if I'm part of a large and diverse social network, that gives me access to knowledge and resources for my economic betterment. And I bring those connections and I bring those benefits back to my community to help everyone. So how is it that social capital leads to economic growth? Social capital helps communities' economies grow in 2 ways: by lowering the cost of doing business and by magnifying the economic impact. So first, transaction costs. Transaction costs refer to those costs associated with doing business, the cost of finding customers, the cost of gaining knowledge and expertise, the cost of entering into agreements to deliver goods and services. Social capital lowers these costs. So if I am part of a large and diverse social network, people know about the goods and services that I provide. I have access to knowledge and resources through my community. And because I'm a trusted member of the community, there's less need to hire lawyers to enter into formal agreements. Social capital saves communities money. Now, you may know that there are some parents who sell cookies for their daughters. You are out there, you know who you are. Parents who work for large organizations sell more cookies than parents that work for small organizations because they have access to a wider range of customers. Likewise, if I play on an intramural soccer team or if I'm part of a prayer group, that creates economic opportunities for my daughters to help their troop. 2, the economic impact of these transactions. Each of these relationship-facilitated transactions has an economic multiplier. So when my daughters sell their cookies, that money goes to their troop. And their troop uses the money to have a pizza party or to go camping. That money pays the salaries of those people that work at the campground or sell pizza. And they use that money to go see a baseball game. And the owner of the baseball team upgrades the facility, creating construction jobs, and so on and so on. When people are socially integrated into their communities, that gives them an incentive to spend their money, and to spend their money locally in a way that magnifies the economic advantage for the communities in which they live. There are a lot of different approaches to economic development. Communities build stadiums to create construction jobs and to attract tourism. A lot of towns have invested heavily in fostering entrepreneurship and building a creative economy. I once had the director of economic development for a major aviation community tell me, incentives and subsidies are all that matters. What I love about relationship-facilitated economic development is that it's cheap, it's easy, and it has positive benefits for everybody in the community. So how do we do this? How do we go about using relationships to foster the economy? First, begin with mapping your community. Look for linking connections. Relationships and networks that are more highly integrated produce economic outcomes better than networks that are disjointed from each other. In order to maximize the economic effect, people's networks need to be connected. So if we go back to this map that we saw earlier, if we take one person out of this map, our once cohesive network separates into 2 disjointed networks with half of the professional and geographic coverage of the first network. We need to be intentional about bringing people together. There was a study, a report that came out not too long ago from the Center for Representative Democracy about the characteristics of the most effective politicians. They identified intelligence, honesty, systems thinking, resourcefulness. I would add that our politicians need to be like Yenta in Fiddler on the Roof. They need to be matchmakers. They need to make connections between people who are otherwise not connected. Second, we need to ask ourselves the question, who do we bring to the table? During some of my early research on economic development, I came across a case of the Church of God of Christ in Wichita, Kansas. The city of Wichita had been approached by the Church of God of Christ because the city had a 50,000 square foot department store that had been given to the city. It had been abandoned, and the city had no idea what to do with it. The church came to the city and said, we have an idea. We want to take this store and break it up into mini stores and use them to incubate entrepreneurship. So here you have the example of a city that had a resource that they didn't know what to do with. And by involving people that's outside of the usual suspects, outside of the major employers, outside of the Chamber of Commerce, outside of the United Way, a church. By involving them in the planning process, they were able to realize an economic outcome that they wouldn't have otherwise attained. Third, support civil society. 40% of Americans go to church regularly. 75% of families with school-aged children are somehow involved in youth sports. Half of women over the age of 25 who describe themselves as regular readers are members of a book club. These are untapped economic development resources. By supporting these organizations as an opportunity to bring people together, we create economic opportunity for everyone. But civil society needs our help. They need financial support from individuals and corporations. But more importantly, they need our time and they need our dedication. There is no silver bullet for economic development, but building relationships is a good first step. So go out, meet your neighbor, volunteer, buy some cookies. Let's get our economy going. Thank you.